This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed.
The weekly wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Claire Kimball.
And I'm Jodie Spears.
We thought that we would end up with this being a really tariffs and election-heavy week, but there's a lot more to cover, including a big week coming up for Meta.
It is. There's also the case of a Brisbane woman and a huge IVF mistake. There are so many questions about that.
Yeah, there sure are. We've got some housekeeping to get you across as well as we head into a couple of long weekends. Let's do it.
Let's go.
Jodie, have you ever come across a dire wolf?
I can't say that I have, Claire. That's probably because it's a wolf that died out some 12,500 years ago. I might be getting older, but I'm not quite that old. This week, though, there were claims that it lives again as the world's first successfully de-extincted animal. That's according to a Dallas-based biotech company.
Yeah, de-extincted is a whole word that I haven't got in my vocabulary, I have to say.
You do now.
We're raising it this week because that development was the most clicked on link when it came to the Squiz today. Also one of the most searched terms on Google this week, dire wolf. De-extinction, it's a very big claim. What happened is that scientists took DNA from a 13,000-year-old tooth and also a 72,000-year-old bit of skull, and hey presto, 3 healthy direwolf pups.
Incredible. When you dive into the science of it, it's actually a bit more complicated than that. You can't just sort of reheat the DNA that's thousands of years old. They've actually tinkered with the DNA of one of its living relatives, the grey wolf, and using gene editing technology and a surrogate, they've managed to make these puppies.
There's heaps of experts though saying, look, chill out, they're not actually direwolves.
Technically not, no. They're genetically altered grey wolves.
Yeah. So, look, if you were wondering what that was about, this is it. It was one of the biggest stories this week. So there you go. We've
Pretty
got you across
fascinating.
that. Look, when it came to, though, the other big news stories of the week, no prizes for guessing. It's been the roller coaster ride that has been the impact of US President Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. What a week.
In so many ways. Do you think we need to do a refresher about the issue at the core of this? It probably doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I reckon we do. I'm going to throw to you to do that. I
I'll
think
do
you're
the
our
honours.
explainery lady today.
I love it. A tariff, as you probably know by now, is a tax charged on goods bought from other countries. Last week, President Trump announced a blanket 10% tariff on pretty much every import into the US and higher tariffs on imports from about 60 countries he said were the worst offenders, including China, Vietnam and Cambodia.
Yeah, they're the reciprocal tariffs, as Trump calls them. And in China's case, they've now hit 145%. Other nations' imports from there were hit with different rates depending on that beautiful mathematical formula that you so beautifully explained to us last week. We actually had a couple of emails saying, thank you, Jodie, for explaining
The
that. I
maths
really
lesson.
appreciate it. Australia wasn't hit with one of those reciprocal tariffs, but we were pinged that 10% baseline tariff like everyone else in the world. So with all of that set to take off on Wednesday, share markets around the world saw trillions, not billions, but trillions of dollars from companies big and small absolutely wiped off their value.
Yeah, to give you a sense of the volatility in the share market, the S&P 500, which is an index of the biggest 500 public companies in the US, it hit an all-time high on February 19, so that was just before Trump was inaugurated, and this week it fell to 17.6% below that level.
Yeah, it's just worth clocking that when Trump was coming into office, investors were really excited about that. They were saying that they really liked what he was saying about what he was going to do with markets and the economy, you know, cutting red tape and making it easier for businesses to operate. But of course, these tariffs are a very different steer, and that has really killed investor confidence. So that swing backwards from that really high mark when he was inaugurated has been a lot of whiplash.
Sure has. So that happened, and a few hours after they came into force, Trump hit the pause button. He said, and like you and Kate before me, I will refrain from attempting a Trump voice. He said people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, they were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid. He said it, I thought, in a bit of a mocking kind of tone. So those reciprocal tariffs are on hold for 3 months for everyone except for China, but the baseline 10% tariff is now in force.
Yeah, that pause saw markets around the world, and including here, rebound. One stat that I saw that I thought was really interesting when it comes to the scale of the series of these share market rises and falls over a series of days, really, really big movements. It's only happened 3 times before in history. One time was the Black Monday stock market crash in 1987, also the start of the GFC, the global financial crisis in 2008, and then the start of the pandemic in 2020.
Yeah, we've been telling you that it's big news, and that paints the picture, doesn't it? And it wasn't just the share market's decline. The US government bond market was a big factor in Trump's pause. I'm on a bit of a roll explaining things, Claire, so I'll have a go at this one too. A bond is essentially a loan, and when it comes to US government bonds, they're bought by foreign central banks and private investors, and in turn the government agrees to pay that much money back later plus interest.
And I guess the thing to clock about bonds is that investors usually go to them when there is a lot of volatility in the public markets, the sort of distress. The issue is that these bonds are usually seen as safe and actually quite a bit boring. But right now, it's the United States government that's creating the chaos. So they were being dumped by investors this week, and that made them cheaper. And that's a huge issue for the US government.
Yeah, big problem because the government uses bonds to fund a whole range of things, including expensive infrastructure projects. So that's the broad brushstrokes of what's happened. I guess the next logical place to go is to ask what it's all been about. Claire, what is Trump trying to achieve?
It's a good question because you can get so wrapped in the, sort of race call of this happened on this day and this happened on this day. But what is it all about? I really like these words from the New York Times, and this is their quote. Mr. Trump's team was put in the unenviable position of trying to spin the media that this was the plan all along, the plan being to threaten to put the tariffs in, start the tariffs and then pause them, backflip maybe. That it was a brilliant strategy straight out of the pages of the president's best-selling book, The Art of the Deal. The insinuation there, of course, is that all this turmoil has been to show the world that he's serious about reforming America's economy, that he'll do whatever it takes to do that, even if it rips the global economy apart.
So there's a chance those steep reciprocal tariffs don't eventuate. That's what some commentators seem to think. And the way that was framed is Trump has been receiving so many requests to negotiate, and each negotiation would be bespoke and therefore would take some time.
Yeah, see, he's not so unreasonable after all, except that's probably not your view if you're China.
No, well, that's an important asterisk when we say that the reciprocal tariffs have been paused. China's not getting that pause. In fact, things have gone from bad to worse with that tit-for-tat exchange that has seen China whacked with a 145% tariff, and China's put an 84% tariff on American imports. Maybe you should give us an example how that plays out.
Yeah, you can get a bit lost in the percentages and numbers, that's for sure. So say I'm in America, I want to buy a $10 T-shirt from Walmart that's been imported from China. Usually I would pay $10 for that. Now it'll be $24.50.
Whew.
That's the sort of scale of it. And when you put that over millions and millions of products and billions of transactions between, of course, the world's 2 largest economies, it's going to hurt on a global scale. And that's still weighing on the markets. So it's not like this pause that Trump has announced on those reciprocal tariffs for all the other nations that things go away, that it's all fixed.
No.
It's not. Yeah.
Where this goes next, who knows? As for Australia's part this week, the Chinese ambassador here suggested that we should work together against the tariffs. He said that we should hold hands and take on President Trump. Both the Albanese government and the coalition have said thanks, but no thanks.
3 other stories to know about this week. Let's start with a story that you might not have heard much about. When we discussed what we're going to round up this week, we decided that there were a few different stories involving Meta that were worth tying together.
Yeah, Meta is so intimately involved in almost all of our daily lives, isn't it? And one of the most talked about global corporations these days. It's been fighting a historic antitrust trial in the US this month, and the US Federal Trade Commission will get the chance to take action against the company. The FTC is probably a bit like our ACCC, the Competition and Consumer Commission. The FTC Meta trial is due to start on late Monday, early Tuesday our time.
Yeah, definitely will be in the news. Some of Meta's past business decisions are going to be put in the spotlight with that case, particularly the acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp. That was back in 2012 and 2014 respectively. The issue is whether or not those moves were actually about stamping out competition. If Meta loses the case, it could be forced to break up its ad business because, of course, it's the thing that generates a lot of money for them, how they serve ads, and they really dominate that market. That ads business is said to be worth $1.3 trillion.
We're talking trillions again. Not just that, it might have to spin off Instagram and or WhatsApp as well. The boss, Mark Zuckerberg, is obviously not too keen on that. He's had a series of meetings at the White House. That's what the Wall Street Journal reported this week. And it's thought that he's trying to reach a settlement in order to avoid this trial.
Yeah, and this is, again, another thing to clock in all of this when it comes to the Trump administration and this new sort of order of things. The FTC is supposed to be an independent agency of the US government, as you explained, much like the ACCC here. But it has a new Trump-appointed chairman, and he has basically said that he would follow the orders of the president if President Trump told him to drop this case against Meta. So we'll have to see what happens there.
We will see. Another scandal of sorts involving Meta this week. A whistleblower has testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee and accused the company of being willing to undermine national security and to betray American values. Her name is Sarah Wynne Williams, and she's a former staffer at Meta.
Yeah, so she worked in a team that handled policy issues relating to China, a very specific team inside that big company. And she says that they developed a special censorship system a decade ago, and that was aimed at the Chinese market. There's always been this sort of tension about Meta and its operations in China and how that would work because the Chinese Communist Party has these big controls when it comes to what's on the internet inside China. So that sort of program, the system that was developed, would allow the Communist Party there to censor social media content and get rid of opinions that it didn't like.
Yeah, Sarah Wynne Williams has basically labelled Mark Zuckerberg a hypocrite because on the one hand, in this new Trump era, he's talking a lot about how important freedom of speech is, and he criticises China in that regard. But on the other hand, he was apparently willing to cooperate with the Chinese government to stamp out freedom of speech.
Yeah, so she has been, just to note as well, engaged in this legal stoush with Meta over a memoir that she wrote. Meta has successfully so far managed to stop her from promoting that book, but it seems that she's found another way to talk about the issues, and of course going via the US Congress is one of those ways.
Yeah, pretty explosive. A late addition to the list was news this week that an Australian woman unknowingly gave birth to a stranger's baby, Claire, after the wrong embryo was transferred during the IVF process. This woman is Brisbane-based and the fertility company involved is Monash IVF.
So this made huge headlines on Friday morning. The company says that it only became aware of the problem after the baby was born, and only because the birth parents asked to move their remaining frozen embryos from Monash to a different provider. And when Monash went to do that, they realised that there was one more embryo than they expected. So the one which had been transferred to the mother then by deduction was clearly not one of her embryos.
I can't even begin to imagine the shock of finding out that that baby that you've grown, you've given birth to, potentially breastfed, bonded with, and completely fallen in love with was not actually your baby biologically. Surrogacy, of course, is one thing when everyone's across the fact that the birth mother is carrying the baby for somebody else, but this is a whole different scenario.
I was, of course, as we get our act together to do this podcast, looking at a lot of news on Friday morning. And I think most of the spokespeople that I saw, whether they were from Monash or experts in the field, most of them were very close to tears talking about it because it's just such a tricky thing that they've stumbled across and now having to deal with. So what Monash IVF says is that it was just simply a human error, that they've done a bunch of checks and they're confident that it's an isolated event. They say they're devastated. They're going to continue to support the clients that they have through this very, very distressing time. I guess the question is, what happens now?
Yeah, very difficult question. That hasn't been announced in the media as far as I can see, as far as whether the baby stays with the birth parents, what the views of the biological parents are. Perhaps there are sensitive discussions going on behind closed doors about that. My mind, of course, goes to all the legal issues involved here, not only a seemingly inevitable case against Monash IVF in tort law, but potentially a case in the family court, which has grappled with some pretty complicated issues before involving who the parents of a child are, but none quite like this one in Australia.
Yeah, look at you, the legal student, dragging out your tort law reference.
This is where I can shine, Claire.
Yeah, and look, the ABC spoke to a lawyer who specialises in this area. They said that they're not really aware of another case like this here. There have been some overseas, though. Jody, you found a story from earlier this year about a woman in the American state of Georgia who gave birth to a baby with black skin. She and the sperm donor, though, were white.
Yeah, so it was pretty obvious to her straight away that there was an issue. She resolved to raise the baby herself, but she did inform the clinic, and then the biological parents asked for the baby back, and she said that she agreed to hand him over to avoid a legal fight, but will never be the same person again. This is not the first legal case or controversy involving Monash IVF either. It was only last year that they settled a class action suit paying $56 million to hundreds of patients whose embryos had been destroyed despite being viable. You probably remember that.
Yeah, that does ring a bell. I remember that.
Yeah, it was claimed that it was a faulty test that was to blame, although the company settled that case without admitting liability.
Yeah, and you can only imagine the extra anxiety that this can cause those who are currently going through IVF. They're being reassured that the situation is incredibly rare. Even outside experts are saying that they feel like the Australian system is very well regulated, but even then this issue has come up. Clinics are being told that they might need to provide extra support and reassurance.
That will be needed, I think. Let's make a big gear change now and talk entertainment, Claire. Of course, the talk of the town this week, the White Lotus finale. Did you watch it?
I sure did. And look, I got into the habit throughout this season, and I think I did it in seasons past, to get into how the American audience sees it. So how HBO drops it is on a Sunday night. It's like appointment viewing. They only drop out one episode a week.
It was sort of a random Monday 1 p.m. for us, wasn't it?
So I saved it up all week to watch on the Sunday night. But this week with the finale, I did the Sunday night one and then I had to watch it on Monday.
You can't avoid the spoilers either.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's been a bit of a controversial series, this one. I've seen lots of people on my feeds complaining about it being a bit slow and saying, I hope the finale finally delivers. It also copped some criticism, though. The reviewer for The Guardian newspaper, I noticed, described it as the show's least satisfying ending ever and said that season 4 will have some redeeming to do.
Look, we're not here to review shows and give our opinion on it, but I will. I loved it. I thought the season was great. That was my personal take.
I liked it too, and the characters are amazing.
Yeah, I thought so too.
And awful.
Yeah, and awful. And that you need them to be awful. That's what the White Lotus is about. But the series has been getting more popular each season. So even though there was all this buzz around season 3, and was it as good as the other two, according to audiences and by size, certainly it seems to have really landed. So HBO, as we said, the production company, it estimates around 20 million people tuned in to the finale. The viewership for the first 24 hours after it dropped outpaced season 2 by 44% and was double the viewership of the first season finale. So if you're wondering how season 3 performed, it's done great. And the finale just seemed to spawn even more speculation.
It really did. Certain viewers, I'm going to shout out my neighbour Kate here, were completely obsessed by the Rick and Chelsea relationship. She sent me so many memes about it this week, and we won't spoil the ending there for those who haven't watched the series or the finale, but the online forums are now speculating on the real-life relationship, or perhaps the lack thereof, between those two actors, Walton Goggins and Amy Lou Wood.
Neighbour Kate, I think Jodie's trying to tell you maybe to back off on the on the memes maybe.
Never.
And look, I was really interested in this point. Apparently the two actors, Goggins and Wood, don't follow each other in Instagram. And we seem to live in an era where that really matters.
That's a statement these days.
So the question is, do they hate each other? Or are they actually madly in love and they're just not connecting on social media so that the whole world can speculate that there's something?
Well, Goggins is married, so that could be the problem there, perhaps.
There's a problem there
Maybe
too.
we'll never know. Although there was a brilliant Aussie actor in the series this time, Rob Carlton, who was, I hope he doesn't mind me saying, sort of the dirty old man on the boat with the young partner.
Yep.
And he's brilliant. He lives up on the Central Coast where we go on holidays, and he's the world's friendliest man. So when we go over Easter, I'm going to be hitting up Rob, seeing if he'll dish the dirt about the behind-the-scenes relationships.
Amazing. I'm going to load you up with some questions.
Write a list.
I did love this sort of seeding of Australian characters in this one because, of course, Australians go to Koh Samui and Thailand quite a bit. So it was really great, I thought, to see a couple of those accents coming through.
Yeah, and Pam, the really friendly staff member who's sort of always in the way, trying to be fun.
Trying to take their devices. The other thing I thought was interesting, of course, I love this intersection of brands with these cultural moments. And Nestle, they own in America a creamer product called Coffee Mate. I've never really understood Americans and creamers. Anyway,
Australians don't get it, do we?
That's a whole other conversation. Coffee Mate did a collaboration with White Lotus this year, and they launched a couple of sort of Thai-themed flavours of creamers. I don't know how a pina colada creamer goes in your coffee.
Not only do we not understand coffee creamer, but imagine adding a pina colada flavoured thing to your coffee. Way to ruin the flavour.
Yeah, exactly. But the issue with that, and it's worth calling out because it's one of those sort of funny moments, if you saw the finale, we're not going to put any spoilers in here, but we can safely say pina colada was definitely at the centre of a sinister plot.
You could say that. It sounds like this was pretty cheeky on the part of the show, actually, because they apparently encouraged that flavour with the people who were looking after the Coffee Mate marketing, and the Coffee Mate team was then forced to post on Instagram saying, well, this is awkward after the finale went to air because obviously they didn't get sort of a spoiler and were convinced to release that flavour.
But here we are talking about Coffee Mate, so potentially it worked all round. As it comes into season 4, that's already been confirmed. It's in the works. Creator Mike White has already said that he's under pressure to get that cracking. He's been told to get out and start scouting locations. In what's coming up, Jodie, the gather round of the AFL is in full swing. Are you an AFL gal?
A little when the Sydney Swans are playing in the final.
Got you.
I'm that kind of fan.
That's when you switch on. Not so much a loyal one, but an opportunistic one.
My husband and I got married on AFL Grand Final day.
Oh, wow.
And our Melbourne and Canberra and Adelaide friends were not very impressed by that. We had a TV available.
Yeah, no one said a word, I'm sure, about that. The gather round is when all the games are played in South Australia. So if you're getting along to a game there this weekend, I hope you have a blast. It sounds like a lot of fun. It's also the National and Under-20s Athletics Championship in Perth. It started already, and already it's been in the news quite a bit. It feels like it's been ages since we've had this many Aussie track and field athletes on our radar.
There's a really strong generation coming through by the sounds of things. Gout, Lockie Kennedy, Leah O'Brien, who broke the Aussie legend Raylene Boyle's under-18 national women's record for the 100 metres this week. The Guardian reported that there are 80 journalists and photographers accredited to cover the event this weekend. That's about 3 times the number last year.
Yeah, a lot of interest in it. And that crowd, and there's more, they're young athletes. So as we look towards the 2032 Brisbane Olympics, things are looking pretty promising.
Very much so. On Sunday, Claire, it's the anniversary of the Bondi Junction Westfield stabbing attack. 6 people were killed and around 10 more were injured in a knife attack by Joel Couchy.
Yeah, a really shocking event for many, and those shockwaves still reverberate. Of course, it's heading back into the coronial world of an inquest there 12 months on. A temporary memorial has been set up outside that shopping centre at Westfield there at Bondi Junction. In the lead up to the anniversary, there's a lot of coverage about it, so you'll see a lot more this weekend.
Also on Sunday, the major party campaign launches are on. Labor's in Perth, and we have searched and searched, but the details on the coalition's launch are TBC at this stage.
Yeah, so Andrew and I, just to let you know, we're giving Squizzes a weekly update on Thursdays. That's in Squiz Shortcuts. It's over on the Squiz Today show. Head over there and have a listen to that. I don't think we need to unpack too much this week about the election, just simply because that Squiz Shortcut that we recorded this week is pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, perfect. And you've dusted off Ask the Squiz, I see.
Yes, we have. So each week we answer 3 of your questions. So if there's something on your mind about the election, just drop us a line at hello@thesquiz.com.au.
Yep, head there for that recce on the campaign, including the leaders' debate and the coalition's backflip on its work from home policy. Before we move on, Claire, it's worth noting what a difficult week that Peter Dutton has had, and I don't mean politically. On Tuesday night, just before he headed out on stage for that first leaders' debate, his father suffered a heart attack and he had word that that had just happened.
Yeah, and look, this is where you just have to acknowledge that they're people. Like they're people going through life.
These things happen.
As we are. And look, he did get home to see his dad later in the week. What he said is he's 80 this year, he's stoic and he's a tough old bugger, so he'll be fine. So, yeah, there was that. And then there was a terror plot that came to light as well against him.
This came out when the 16-year-old boy was this week committed to stand trial. He's accused of obtaining bomb-making instructions and testing homemade explosives that would be delivered using a drone to target Dutton's home. The coalition leader hasn't commented on that yet, but that has got to be unsettling for him and his family.
Oh, yeah, that would definitely weigh on you, that's for sure. To round off politics Tuesday, Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese will face off in the second leaders' debate. That's at 8 p.m. East Coast time on ABC TV. David Spears is moderating.
No relation?
No.
Although I wouldn't mind claiming one.
There you go. Yeah, I hadn't even thought whether you were related. No relation.
I've been constantly asked that question. No.
Yeah, there you go. I hadn't even clocked it. Back to Monday, the criminal trial of former South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol begins.
That comes 4 months after he briefly declared martial law in the country in December. He said that was necessary because the opposition was trying to paralyse the government with anti-state activities plotting rebellion.
I distinctly remember waking up that morning and going, what on earth is going on there?
Yeah, me too. South Korea is a democratic nation and an increasingly important player in the region, so it was quite jarring to see that news. Anyway, a constitutional court unanimously ruled just last week that Yoon Suk Yeol had abused his power, and that decision officially removed him from office.
Yeah, it's also triggered a snap South Korean election. That's going to be held on the 3rd of June.
Claire, Lady Gaga announced Aussie dates for her Mayhem Ball World Tour this week. General tickets go on sale on Thursday with pre-sale on Monday, and it's been 11 years since Lady Gaga performed in Australia in a tour. You got Kate and Annelise tickets to Taylor Swift's Eras tour last year, and I'm just now wondering if I might be in line for a little Lady Gaga ticket.
Well, look, Kate and Annelise were huge Taylor Swift fans. Are you like beside yourself Lady Gaga fan?
I wouldn't say beside myself, but you never regret a concert.
Then you don't get tickets.
And she, should have lied.
That. Yeah, exactly. Like I would go to
I would
America
totally
to
go.
see her.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. No, then no tickets for
you. Sorry.
Next Friday, started the Easter long weekend. I had that moment this week looking in the calendar, thinking I had an extra week up my sleeve and going, oh gosh, it's Easter next week.
Already.
So if it snuck up on you too, we're in the same camp. The weekend after that, of course, is the Anzac Day long weekend. So just to let you know, that means we're not going to be in your ears for the next couple of Saturdays.
Yeah, but we have you covered. The final episode of Newsmakers Season 2 drops on Wednesday. It's with Mandy Wicks, the Director of News at SBS. And then across the 2 Saturdays on those long weekends, we'll be putting out special episodes featuring some of our favourite and most memorable moments from the season.
Yeah, look, we hope you're going to have a nice couple of long weekends. We're certainly going to, because we're going to sort of pace ourselves through a couple of weeks. And those sort of shortcuts of what's happened in Newsmakers will be really good stuff to listen to on a couple of long weekends, we reckon. Jodie, moving on to a couple of recommendations. You've got something for us to read.
Yeah, there's a profile piece in the Free Press called Meet Usher Vance, MAGA's enigmatic second lady. This one actually came through Kate Watson, who might be on parental leave but always has her antenna up.
Prolific.
Yeah. First interview, I believe that SLOTUS, as they call her, has granted since she became SLOTUS, the second lady of the United States.
Wow.
As opposed to FLOTUS. She's a really impressive woman. She was top of her Yale Law School class. She's not yet 40, I think, but she's had this incredible career in law. And I was interested because I'd read J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy, years ago, before he was on my political radar really at all. And she came into that book a bit because they met at law school. But reading a bit about becoming second lady was quite interesting. So we'll pop that link in the show notes as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Can't wait to read that. Kate, as you said, did throw that through. I usually reserve some time on a Saturday to do all these great reading recommendations, so it's on my list. Jodie, long-time squizzers will know that I don't think soup is food.
Oh, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Even like a really cosy winter soup with toast and goat's cheese dipped in?
Toast is food.
Just not the liquid soup part.
That's something you drink.
But hang on, you're recommending a soup.
I'm recommending a soup.
You take it all back.
I do, as I get older, recognise the convenience of soups, particularly when it comes to getting some good nutrition in a convenient way. You can make a whole batch and, you know, you can sort of pace yourself through the week.
Get your veggies for the week.
Anyway, I put my big girl pants on the weekend and decided to tackle some soups, thinking that this would be a good thing through the week. I have found something called an Italian wedding soup. It's not for the occasion of a wedding. It's like the marriage of flavours and sort of different things that you can put in and make it a food. So it has little meatballs, it's got a little bit of pasta, it's got greens, it's got a lovely chicken broth. I reckon I'm going to make that a regular because I made
delicious.
a batch this week and I actually felt not disappointed and angry like soup usually makes me.
You felt satisfied.
I felt satisfied. So, yeah, the recipe I used, which I really enjoyed, we've got that too.
Delicious.
Squiz Press, we wanted to let any quiz fans know that we're doing a monthly wrap of the news via a monthly quiz. So when it comes to March, it's in the Squiz Today show tomorrow, so on Sunday. Andrew Williams hosts and steers that. He's a bit of a quiz whiz. I wanted to ask you whether you get competitive as a family when it comes to quiz.
With Squiz Kids, we do, because there's the squiz at the end of those episodes, and the kids usually beat me, which is quite embarrassing because I'm preoccupied thinking about a million things and they're actually paying attention.
Well, go the kids. They're amazing. That's it for us this week. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend. We'll be back on the 3rd of May. It's election weekend, if you can
Pretty
believe
big weekend to come back.
Yeah, we'll have a bit to wrap up, that's for sure.
Enjoy your break.